Welcome, FarmBits listeners, to part 2 of our conversation with Dr. Michael Cahn, as we continue on this episode about specialty cropping systems on the central coast of California.
We read that you led the development of a crop management tool that helps growers manage water and nutrient decision. Could you explain how the idea came up and how this tool works?
Yeah, so the need for a tool like this is from what I was telling you about, that we have all these little fields that we have to manage, and each one has different needs for nitrogen and water, depending on what crop, when you grow it. And we know how we could recommend water and nitrogen, but there's a lot of calculations involved. And so one of the farmers asked if, I had a spreadsheet that could help them make those calculations. So we started, with a spreadsheet model. And then we saying, wait a second, I need a spreadsheet for every one of my fields. I have, 500 different fields. This is not going to work. So we said, okay, well, what if we turn that into an online tool, which has a database, holds all the information about your fields, and the models are on top of that database, so it can give you recommendations. And then we have this work on a smartphone or a tablet computer. So you can do this in the field. So we've been working on this tool for over a decade, and it's gone through a lot of iterations. But basically it helps growers in terms of giving them decision support on water management, irrigation management, and nitrogen management. And it doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what to do over the whole course of the year. As you use it, you say, I would like to irrigate on tomorrow. How long should I irrigate? It will tell you that, which is what we heard from growers is what they want to know. It's they don't want to see that, the recommendation is for 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre, and then they have to figure out how many gallons of fertilizer or how many hours of water to put on. We want it to really give them the answer they need at the end, which is how many hours to put on and how many gallons of fertilizer to apply for this field. So we've got it working like that.
That's awesome. I like that. I like the accessibility of it. I like the ease of it. I think that's really unique and really cool for your area, because you're working in so many different cropping systems on, it sounds like these smaller fields. So I think that's really unique. With that, how many growers do you currently have using CropManage today? Do you have an estimate?
It's hard to, sort of say, because all the data is private. So I don't see their accounts necessarily. We do query the database. I would say there's like at least 3,500 accounts on there, and probably we've estimated about 300 active users at any point in time, which is a start, Yeah. And, not everyone wants to adopt a new technology. There's people that use it, to learn about better nutrient management. And once they feel they've learned something, they don't want to deal with using a piece of software. But typically over the season, CropManage is providing about 1,000 to 1,500 recommendations a month.
Okay.
So that's how I explain it. It's putting out a lot of recommendations, and we'd like to see that grow, of course. And we've been expanding it to tree crops, even vineyards. And we will probably start expanding it into some agronomic crops, because there's been interest in doing that too.
Awesome. We love to hear it. I like that. We're gonna backtrack a little bit, and can you tell us which crops CropManage is designed for?
Yeah. So it was originally designed, we started with lettuce and then expanded to other vegetable crops and brought in berries. And then we did bring in alfalfa as our first agronomic crop. And then some of the tree crops we have are almonds, pistachio, walnuts, pear, and prunes. And in terms of berries, we have strawberries, we have raspberries, mainly in there. And we're working on blackberries.
Okay. Awesome. That's really cool. This question's not written down. I'm just kind of curious. What do you have to do to change like the specifications for each crop when you go to like incorporate a new one?
Right. So on the irrigation side, we need to understand how the canopy develops over time, because we base the crop coefficient on the canopy, the fractional cover. And then from there, we can adjust the crop coefficient that we use to convert reference ET to a crop ET. And so, with different planting configurations, you may have different canopy developments. And so when we go to a different crop or a different region, we usually take a lot of overhead photos of the crop using like an NDVI camera. And we do this in a lot of commercial fields, analyze the data, develop the model, and we have, sort of a development model for the canopy. On the nitrogen side, that can be tricky. And we usually need to know the end demand of the crop. If it's not published, what we have to do is actually harvest the crop over time, all the above ground biomass, and analyze it for nitrogen. And while we're doing that, we'll do potassium and phosphorus and see what the uptake demand is as you go through the season. And that's going to depend on planting configurations and how it's grown. So, for example, we've worked with the University of Hawaii that wanted to adopt CropManage there, and they had to collect their own data because how they grow lettuce in Hawaii, it's a lot different than in California. And so we take those models and we create a new crop type in CropManage that way.
Awesome. I really like that you bring out the modeling to the plant systems. I think that's so important when we talk about any sort of crop modeling systems. And so I think that's really good. I like that.
Like regarding all, being a little bit broad in our question, regarding all the research that you have done and leading the development of CropManage, from your perspective, how do you see research like this being implemented on growers' operations?
Yeah, so I've had the unique experience, being an extension, but unlike, maybe some other states, all of us that are in extension in California, we do research. So you get to see both worlds, and we work directly with growers. There's not so much pressure to publish like you have on campus. So I can spend a lot more of my time, with trying to understand. The big question is, I got this great research result, why aren't growers implementing it? And working with growers on that. And that is a complicated answer from growers. And we try lots of different things to help get our research implemented. It's not for my ego, but because I want to help them, do better in the management. And a lot of it is, the growers have to do their part in having the right staff and hiring the right people to implement new practices. They often have staff that's been there for 20 or 30 years that doesn't want to change. And what are you going to do? You can't just fire them or anything, and they do a good job otherwise. So there's a lot of challenges I see on the grower side in getting practices implemented because we use so much, different labor out there in the field. And so that's been sort of interesting because it's really directed my research to always work on more practical applications. It's too complicated, it's not going to be used, right? And with water and nutrient management, those are tough areas, to convince growers to make changes, especially with these high value vegetable and berry crops. So, through my career, have we made a big change? I'm not sure. We do see that the nitrogen rates are coming down. Part of it is regulations that growers are facing, and but they do fight those regulations too. And so you're sort of caught in between the regulatory areas, research, and what's practical, by the practitioners, the growers, in trying to understand the whole thing. So it's a very unique position to be in. How much impact we have, I don't know. We'll see over time.
Yes, I like that you bring up your work in extension as well as research, and working directly with growers to create practical, applicable solutions. I think that's so important. I think that's also really reflected here in Nebraska Extension as well. So I like that. You kind of answered our next question, which was, but if you have something different, what would you say is your greatest contribution of your work within research?
Well, I think the CropManage is pretty unique because I know, there's a lot of published models out there, to help growers, decision support systems that are out there. But what I think has been unique about CropManage is it's been a give and take with the growers. We've developed it, working with them. They give us input back, and then we make changes. And because we're actually using it in our extension program. So for example, I will say, are you interested in working on better nitrogen management? Yeah. Okay, well, let's set up your field on CropManage so we can all follow it. Right. So we actually use it in our extension work. And at the same time, we're sort of training them on how to use it. And some people, really say, "Oh, I love this," and they run with it. Other people is like, "Oh, do I have to turn the computer on?" So, but it is a very practical, useful tool, and it's we try to minimize the number of inputs and variables and things to make it work. But over time, I think we've proven it saves water, it saves nitrogen. And so it's not exactly the CropManage that I'm proud of, but there's the approach that has been very collaborative.
What are you most looking forward to in the future of integrating digital tools in specialty crop production?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of innovations with satellite data. And we've been working with NASA over the years. They have the Landsat satellites, but there's other satellites out there. And so there's a possibility, that we could bring in estimates of real-time ET, from satellite images, and we're involved in some of the calibration of those type of models right now in some of our specialty crops, where we have eddy covariance stations, so they directly measure ET out in the field, and then they have satellite data and satellite models, space models of ET, and so it may be possible really to get an estimate of actual ET, which is especially important for some of the tree crops and vineyards to know really how much water they're using versus potentially how much they could be using if you irrigate them more or less. So I just think with time, the satellite information is going to be better and better, and the models that we use in sort of making estimates on water use and nitrogen use, I'm hoping those will be better. One other area is nitrogen mineralization models. That's always a black box. How much nitrogen is available from organic amendments, from crop residues, from the soil organic matter. If we can get those models working better and be better decision support, that's going to help us with our nitrogen management too. And I've told people it's a little bit like, weather forecasts. When I was a kid, the weatherman was maybe right 50% of the time. But now I'm just amazed, how accurate weather forecasts are. So we get our models to be better and better. Maybe it's going to take more artificial intelligence involved, but yeah, I see in the future, these digital tools will become more and more accurate and hopefully easier to use so that the farmers actually implement them.
Awesome. I like that. I think you're correct on that. I think satellite imagery is going to be a huge player in the future, and I'm very excited to see what can be done in specialty production with it. Is there anything today we didn't talk about that you might want to add or mention to share with our listeners?
Well, one of the biggest limitations in improving agriculture, I think I've mentioned, has been the staff that growers have working for them. And so, believe it or not, anyone who's studying agriculture is going to be really important in moving things forward, in being more efficient with water and nutrients. Equipment, models, all these tools can only do so much, but it takes people with problem-solving skills, understanding the science, to work for growers to get any of this to move forward. So I really see it, it's the next generation. It's going to make a lot of innovations. My generation, we did the best we could in learning the science, but we really see that we're doing this for the next generation to hopefully pass the torch to. So I'm very encouraged, to see lots of people getting in, realizing, hey, agriculture is a nice area to study. And so it's a lot of the young people that we're hiring in extension, or we're seeing growers hire, I've been very impressed with.
Awesome.
Nice. Where can our listeners go to learn more if they are interested, or more questions arise about anything we talked about today?
Well, we do have a website for our county, and we have an agricultural blog called the Salinas Valley Agricultural Blog. You can always sign up there. They get postings. We have on our website a mailing list. So we send out newsletters or, announcements about meetings. The CropManage, if they sign up there, we'll get automatically, e-newsletters once in a while. So there's lots of different ways to keep in touch with what's going on in the Central Coast here.
Awesome. And then there's a tradition on the FarmBits podcast to ask for a piece of advice. What advice do you have for anyone interested in getting into specialty crops research and production systems?
Well, I would say there's a lot to learn. And so no matter where you start, just you would just be a sponge and learn as much as you can. I'm still learning, because you think, oh, vegetables, they're all the same. No, each one is a unique species. It has different nutrient requirements, different growing requirements. It's tricky. And I'm amazed that a grower can grow 50 different types of vegetables, and be successful, and everyone looks beautiful. They have a lot of knowledge. And so I'm always learning. So just be open to learning a lot, because you're going to need to learn a lot, and we, when I worked in the Midwest, it was pretty much like soybean and corn, and everyone's working on that. But here we have like 300 commodities. And how do you learn about all that? And it's a fascinating area to work in, because there's so much to learn.
Yeah. Thank you very much to Dr. Michael Cahn for taking the time to join this episode of the FarmBits podcast. It's really exciting to hear about his expertise in such a variety of specialty cropping systems. My favorite part of this episode would be learning about his development of CropManage for each cropping system.
And my favorite part was the research focus on developed pan polyacrylamide and the challenge for farmers to adopt it. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we look forward to sharing another digital ag story with you next week on FarmBits.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today on the FarmBits podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts to be informed about the latest content each week.
We welcome your feedback, so if you have comments or questions for us, please reach out to us over email, on Twitter, or in the review section of your favorite podcast platform. Our contact information can be found in the show notes.
We would like to thank Nebraska Extension for their support of this podcast. Their commitment to providing high-quality informational material to members of the agricultural community in Nebraska and beyond.
The opinions expressed by the hosts and guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not reflect the views of Nebraska Extension of the University of Nebraska, Lincoln.
We look forward to you joining us next week for another episode of FarmBits.